Welcome to ABG, Asian Boss Girl, a podcast for the modern day Asian American woman. I'm Mel.
I'm Helen.
And I'm Janet. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that we've gotten a couple of requests on, and it is about imposter syndrome. So what exactly is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is a state of insecurity and self-doubt about one's ability and or achievements, believing that they are due to luck or having successfully deceived others into thinking they are smarter or more capable than they really are. It tends to be prevalent, especially among women, and it's a fear that you are a fraud.
Oof. And I think this is actually a topic that I'm surprised we haven't addressed yet. Mm-hmm. It's like, 3 seasons in now?
Yeah.
It's the 4th season now. But whether it's because we're women or maybe Asian American women, I know we all feel that both personally and professionally, we sometimes feel held back by this crippling thought that, sometimes we feel stupid or we feel anxious or we feel vulgar, that we have speech impediments or our or our vocabulary isn't expansive enough, that we're not worldly enough. Whatever it is, we leave the possibility of success to other people. And I think especially as Asian American women, we don't see ourselves in enough people around us that do get praised and are given accolades. Sometimes it's easier to not even try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or it's too easy to think that you're just not good enough or that you don't belong with the people that you define as successful.
And I think it's also important to point out that it's not a disease or an abnormality, and it's not necessarily tied to depression either. There are studies that say that about 70 to 75% of people face this, with even a higher percentage amongst women. So a lot of us do go through this, and for sure, us three do. Mm-hmm. So I guess for you ladies, what are some examples of having gone through imposter syndrome, or wherever you are right now, that you don't feel like you deserve that?
Man, I feel like I could talk about so many different aspects of my life, but I think the one thing that comes to thought is work. I feel all of us feel that mostly at our jobs. For me, currently, I think I feel like that at my job.
Mel just started a new job recently, right?
Yeah, I definitely got a title change that's much higher than I'm used to. So I am working for a media company now, and now my title includes the word head of something.
Whoa.
Yeah. Whoa, that sounds, yeah. But don't
dirty. Just kidding.
Girl. No. But I think just having somewhere like a title like director or head or like a manager role, you feel like you're given so much more responsibility, which you are, but you feel like you have so much pressure to deliver on that title now. And I think for me, it's kind of intimidating to wear a title or a role like that because you feel like people are relying on you, right? And so the ladies and I were talking, there's an article put out by The Muse, talks about the different types of imposter syndromes, right? The imposter syndrome can be broken down in kind of like 5 different categories, right? The first one is the perfectionist. The second one is the superwoman. The third is the natural genius. The fourth is the soloist. And the fifth is the expert. I'll probably share the article with you guys if you guys want to read. I fall into the expert type. And so the expert type in the article explains that experts measure their competence based on what and how much they know or can do. Believing they will never know enough, they fear being exposed as inexperienced or unknowledgeable. So for me, I think that since right now I'm working for a media company that is kind of more like a startup, so I feel like my department or my role hasn't really been established previously until I stepped in. And so stepping in this role of head of something, I feel like I'm really just trying to build out my own department and really figure out what I'm doing. I think with that is really intimidating because usually in your previous jobs, you're like, okay, you're going to a role, your manager or your training director or whatever will be like, this is what you need to do and how you get there. But walking into this role, the CEO is like, all right, Mal, this is your thing. This is what we want. Big picture. How are you going to do this? So I'm pretty much setting the foreground and the processes for my department. And I feel like I'm not knowledgeable enough in this because no one has done this before. So I'm literally ordering so many books and like trying to read as much as I can and talking to the CEO and talking to other heads. And I feel like even though I'm gaining more knowledge, it's not enough. I don't feel like I'm a pro yet at my job. And then granted, it's only been like 2 months, but I feel like I have to be there already because I wear this title. And then I think that's something I struggle with at work is like, oh my God, I need to read more. I need to keep reading more articles, talk to more people. But I feel like even though I keep doing that, I don't feel complete.
But I think that's also because your media company is somewhat of a startup company still, right? So everyone who has a role in that company is going to have these like larger titles than maybe you would if you were to start in like a bigger media company. Yeah, I could see how that's incredibly difficult because no one before you has created that path for you. At the same time, you have like this world of just like doing whatever the fuck you want. And as long as you can turn around as the social media head. So I feel like setting targets for yourself. I know you're doing this and you're also apparently killing it at your job right now, right? Because you've grown the following pretty well.
Yeah, but I think for me, it's like that part is like, so actually my role is two different positions. There's one is social media driven and one is more like audience and community building. And I feel like social media, it feels really natural to me and I feel like I am accomplishing it. I feel like I still feel like I'm not there yet though. You know, so maybe because I see people like my manager, my previous role has been in social media for 8 years. I'm like, maybe I need to put more time so I could feel like I'm more deserving of this role versus like, I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So you attribute to like mastery or greater expertise. Like you look at that as a signifier of like earning the title.
Yeah, totally. So I think for me, that's what I struggle with in terms of like imposter syndrome at work. But how about you guys? I know you guys both probably, you know, Janice, are a new job. Do you feel like with your new job, you feel imposter syndrome or your previous roles?
I think, well, I've changed careers like 3 or 4 times. So I can speak to feeling like you're a fraud because every time I've started something new, there's a little bit of the fake it till you make it mentality, right? And especially because a lot of the roles I go into, I'm not coming in as like entry level because I have some work experience, just not at the level of like in that thing. At the start of almost every job, it takes me a couple months where I battle internally with like low self-confidence or like you're questioning and you become oversensitive, like did I do that right? Or like, you know, I shouldn't be here and that kind of stuff. So
I think that's actually really commendable because I mean I've been at my job for like almost 9 years now and I always do think to myself like if I were to quit, like oh my god, I have to go into another job, into a new team, doing everything completely differently and literally would have this like crippling feeling of that I'm not doing enough. So the fact that you've been able to jump from job to job to job and almost like normalize this do you feel like over a certain amount of time now, having done this so many times, you've been able to like normalize that feeling of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I feel like I just give less fucks now. Which I think some of that comes with age too. And it comes from changing a couple of times and learning that like, hey, you didn't get fired. Like you're okay. Yeah. I would say that sometimes I suffer from the opposite where because you feel like a fraud, you overcompensate and then you come off as like too strong maybe. People might receive like, whoa, like you are brand new and you shouldn't be expected to do that much. So you shouldn't be at a place where you think you're doing more. If that makes, I don't know if that makes sense.
I was gonna say like, I don't know if you guys relate to this, but I kind of always feel like I'm an intern, even though I'm like a full-time employee. I think maybe for me, like being an intern seems so fresh in my mind. And the task I did was like, oh, like I do menial tasks and do like kind of like busy tasks. But my previous job was a lot of busy tasks. So I feel like whenever I have an intern under me, I'm like, what? No. Like that's not, I have an intern? Like I still feel like that. But even looking back when I was an intern, my managers were 27, 28, like my age. But I feel like I'm not even deserving of an intern sometimes because I feel like one myself.
Yeah.
Oh, it ties back to the expert.
Oh, probably.
Those that have a sense of mastery or have done something for a long time. Yeah. What kind of like makes you deserving of the title. Of the different types, one of the other subtypes of imposter syndrome is the soloist. And it's the belief that like it's kind of like feeling like you need to have done things yourself or you don't feel right about asking for help. And I think that if I relate and think back to my working experience, that does come up quite a bit because if I have jumped to a thing and it's kind of newish, I constantly feel like I need to be proving myself. So if I'm given a project or if I'm given a task or if I'm working with a team even, it needs to be clear that I've contributed. So sometimes I'm very aware of like not just skating by without contributing something more like measurable or legitimate. Dang. Yeah. How about you, Helen? What's of these?
So my example goes back to actually college when I was interviewing for my first job. So I was part of the Carroll School of Management at Boston College. So finance, there is like 1 month or 2 months where you interview with like all of the big corporations for a good finance job. And I had signed up for Big Four accounting and I was a double major in finance and marketing. So I had no idea what I was signing up for because I was literally just like, that's a name, put my name down, right? Until someone at the Career Center said to me like, oh, you're going for accounting, but you're not accounting background. So you should be going for like some finance related job instead. So instead she said, okay, at this company, there's another position within their valuation team. So maybe go for that instead. And I was like, the fuck is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that interview was like a week from the point when I switched it to valuation instead. I went out and bought this book, and I'll never forget this. It's called The Vault Guide to Finance.
Oh, The Vault. I have their guides too.
It's like a freaking Spark Notes for like a whole topic, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Read that book back to back. It was like maybe like 80 pages, pretty short. And literally the day of the interview, so that was during that week, I just studied that one book and like aced that interview, but only because I read that book. Otherwise, I would not have gotten that job. And so then when I went in for a Super Day interview at the actual company, I didn't know anything beyond that book. The same question that was asked to me on campus interview was the same question that was asked to me at the company. So that's like the only reason why I got my job. Because I knew that like one thing, I was walking through a discounted cash flow analysis from like top to bottom, like revenue, COGS, OPEX, etc. So if it wasn't for that, then I wouldn't have gotten my job. And so if you can imagine like my day one of starting that job, I was just like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm like getting myself into at all. Because I was like, I took evaluation like very briefly within corporate finance, but that's really it. So I think my first year, I was definitely falling under like the perfectionist, where I felt like everything had to be at the highest quality, or else someone would call me out and say, hey, you're not actually fit for this job. Like, you're going to get fired.
That's interesting, because I actually feel like a lot of people could probably relate to that story for if you're coming into your first job, because you really don't know anything in any. But it's hard until after the fact. Now, if you look back, you're like, if I was starting that job with other people, most people probably didn't really study valuation, right? So you probably knew just as much, if not more, than a lot of your peers. But for you, because it was that same interview question, you kind of had this inner dialogue that was like, I don't deserve to be here.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I think one of the reasons why imposter syndrome does happen is because when you look at your peers, you think that everyone puts up a front, right, of this like very polished outer surface. But I think because we don't talk about what's going on in our own heads, all of the anxiety and all of the difficulties of whatever we have to accomplish, then we just feel like our peers are doing everything perfectly. And so we feel like we have imposter syndrome, that we shouldn't be deserving of where we are. Yeah,
because with your coworkers, probably that culture, it wasn't common to talk openly, right? To be like, hey, do you know how to do this? Like, I don't know either.
Right, yeah. There's so much Googling.
Yeah.
Like, Google is my best friend. Google and just asking. I think that's why they also give you peer advisors. So you can ask someone at your same level or like one level right above you all your stupid questions.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you just feel like you can't ask anyone. You feel very alone. But yeah, that's my imposter syndrome
For work.
story. Yeah, for work.
I think one thing that helps me with my imposter syndrome with my current job is like the heads of my company and the CEO is very like, Mel, like we believe in you and there's potential, like all this stuff. And so it's like, they see this in me and they're like, we know you're not going to get it like overnight. And I think they're very encouraging of it. And they're encouraging the fact that this is not something you'll get like tomorrow. You have to, it's going to be a process, and that's okay. And I do think that like I could understand why Janice, you're more familiar with the transition process now when you transition to jobs, because like even when like my last company where I got promoted to like a content producer, that change just kind of fucked me up, because like any change freaks me out, because then I feel like intense imposter syndrome. But knowing how I went through that and like realizing that, hey, after a year later, I'm okay. Like I'm more confident in my role. So stepping to this role, even though some things are new to me and foreign and I feel kind of like pressure, I know like a year from now, I'll feel completely different.
Yeah.
And I'm actually like, it's good to look forward to that moment. Yeah. But for now, I definitely feel like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough. But
that's actually in my current new job as well, Mel, like you were mentioning, having your coworkers openly like acknowledge and tell you it's okay. Yeah. That's been really helpful for me too. Because I've had a number of people coming up to me and being like, don't worry, when I started, like it takes a little bit of time to kind of like ramp up. And so I feel like being in a culture like that where the communication is open is so helpful.
Oh yeah. This kind of relates to management style, like, or like what works for you. Because in my last role, I felt like I really connected with my VP of marketing when she will tell me like, Mel, like I believe in you, all these things. And you felt it was really genuine and stuff versus like, I think at the time, me and my other manager, she was really encouraging, but she'll say things like, don't let them
see you sweat.
Don't let them see you sweat. I'm just like, but I'm sweating though. Like, like I'm freaking out. I'm nervous. And I feel like I couldn't really open up in that way. But then with my VP, I could. And I felt like having that vulnerability with her allowed me to gain more confidence in my job, because I believed in myself after that too.
There's definitely something about like bigger corporations or the type of company that I work at where it's like, if you can't figure it out yourself, if you rely on other people to reach out and help you, then you're not going to be able to make it to the top. You have to like very independently go out there and ask questions, ask so many questions, and figure out how to get there kind of yourself, which is tough because it's like then it's a very closed door sort of a policy, right?
Yeah.
I think that is changing now though, as I think more like mental health is sort of at the forefront and understanding stress levels a little bit more. That is becoming more important at work. But I would say that when I first started off, it was like, what the fuck am I doing? No one knows, and you just have to get by.
Do you think that, I don't want to make this an issue of like gender, but do you think it's like associated with an industry that's a little bit more like male dominant?
Yeah, no, I think that's also, I mean, we always say representation matters, but literally, if you don't see someone else that is similar to you in terms of personality or even like age or skin color or whatever it is at the top, you don't feel like you deserve to be there, right? If no one else can make it, I for sure can't. And so whenever you have that like sudden doubt in yourself or lack of confidence, then you're not gonna like speak up. You kind of like, or at least this is what I did. I would just like be quiet and just like Google things and be like, how do I figure this out?
Yeah.
You know, so you're kind of like struggling in silence.
Jen, you brought up like, you know, maybe it's something with gender related to why women feel a sense of like maybe a stronger sense of imposter syndrome or a certain type, right? But I think culturally also is a connection to why, you know, we as Asian American women feel imposter syndrome, because growing up, I mean, all of us felt a hella pressure from our parents to be perfect, right? I think we were placed in tutoring classes after school to make sure we get an A+, or, you know, like classes to learn an instrument, right? So I feel like it was brought onto us at a young age.
Yeah. And even if it wasn't, because like I would describe my parents and the way they raised me as not like traditional, like outright putting on pressure, but I do think it's baked in the culture to kind of be critical of your children for their benefit, right? So it's like saying things that might come off in rude, maybe in other cultures, but the
negative reinforcement.
Yes, exactly. Like pointing something out that you might find hurtful or insulting, but it's like, I want you to know so that it's something you can improve on.
Yeah.
And I think we were talking about like reading articles about in the imposter syndrome where, was it Helen that you said that like people who are raised in situations where maybe you're critiqued or...
Well, so it was like a TED Talks about imposter syndrome, and it was a white lady. And so she was saying that a lot of imposter syndrome comes from maybe households that had domestic violence or had alcoholism or whatever that might have been, where the parents will criticize the kids and make them feel like they're not enough. Honestly, I heard that and I was like, dude, this is like an Asian household. We're not enough. Like, that's all you need. You don't need alcoholism. You don't need like abuse. You just need Asian parents.
Yeah. And it's like, we know like culturally that it comes from a place of wanting for you to improve, but it still does not change the fact that potentially like that plays into your psyche as you get older, right?
Exactly. It's not like our parents love us any less. It is just literally how they show love to us to try and help us improve.
You know, I wonder if this is also tied, because I think growing up in an Asian American household, we don't like celebrate success. It's
that's a really good
kind
point.
of more like you're supposed to get that.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's on to the like focus on the next thing then. How can you do better? Yeah.
Like honestly, like my parents, like my mom is pretty Americanized in a sense, but I remember this distinctly because we're at a meeting here and I was on the way to ABG meeting and I was like, because we're selling merch now and we're trying to make some like money to like pay our editor and like other miscellaneous things. And I was like, Mom, oh my gosh, we're making money now, or just a little bit. And I was like really excited because we weren't making anything for the longest time. We're not making a lot, by the way, but I thought it was a small win for us. And I was telling my mom this and she's like, you're not counting the taxes and all these other things. And I'm just like, oh, okay, like just wanted to share that, you know, we're taking a step forward for ABG. But that was the first thing she said to me. You're not accounting for all the expenses you're spending on.
Yeah. And that, I think from her, like culturally, that comes from a place of like, okay, so you've done that. I don't need to help you accomplish that. You've already accomplished that.
Yeah.
How do you accomplish more? Oh, make sure that you're accounting for the, you know, that you're covering yourself in other aspects.
Even with my new job too, she was like, oh, you're not making that much more money. I was like, what the? She's like, you're not accounting for all these other expenses. I'm like, oh my God, Mom, let me have a win.
Leave me alone.
let me have a win.
Let me live, bro.
No, seriously, but I think that's what it is. Like, we don't celebrate the wins.
Yeah, it's expected. It's almost like, well, yeah, you work so hard, you should get here. So what are you so proud of? Like, move on to the next thing.
And actually, Mel, that you're bringing up being tied to kind of culturally how we are raised to be doing multiple things, right? Academics, and then also, you know, clubs or like activities and things like that. That kind of ties into one of the other categories of imposter syndrome, which is being the superwoman. So believing that you're convinced that you're a phony amongst the real deal colleagues if you're not pushing yourself to work harder and doing everything or doing more. But yeah, believing that the number of activities or the number of accomplishments is what it ties to your personal value, right? That you have to do everything.
I feel like I do feel that way. I feel like sometimes at work, it's like I will try my hardest to do something, but I'm only meeting up to par of everyone else. Like I'm not doing more by staying later and doing extra work, but I'm just trying to stay afloat and survive. Even though maybe in other people's eyes, they're like, oh, this is like much better quality of work. And actually, this is something I see at work a lot. Maybe amongst women, we don't ask for feedback. And I think there are times when maybe throughout like a 3-month project, maybe you messed up one small part of it, but then you remember that moment as like, this is my contribution to the project and I failed at that one aspect. So I don't even want to hear about the feedback because I know it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
And so I don't think a lot of women ask for feedback, but if they were to hear the feedback, they would hear the 95% of the things that they did really, really well. And that might help them push to the next level, feel encouraged and confident that they're meant to be there.
So it's a little bit of the perfectionist thing happening there as well, right? Believing that you're doing one small mistake invalidates your contribution or your value.
Yeah.
I actually wonder, like going off a different topic besides work, is that I wonder if a lot of people who are aspiring to pursue a passion are afraid to take that leap because they feel like they're not good enough to do it. Or there's someone else out there doing something better.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely something that the three of us kind of talked behind the curtains for even doing this podcast, right?
Yeah.
We struggled a lot with feeling imposter syndrome, like we would be frauds if we kind of put an Asian American voice out there and to be the representatives of, or to be a representative in that space.
I remember too, like this moment, there was a year we're about to launch and we were still recording. We're like literally like doing the website. And I think we were getting pep talks from like our friends and like encouragement. But like I texted you guys, I'm like, I really feel like I'm not worthy of this. Or I feel a lot of pressure to represent like a bunch of Asian American women when literally like this is just my story. This is how I go about life. Because I do think once you put yourself in the public to like people listen to you and relate to you, you're like, you have kind of like a
responsibility
now to like kind of like do justice to all these women. But I'm like, shit, like, am I good enough for this? Because I don't know.
I would say that if we had decided that where we are now is where we wanted to be from the beginning, that would instill way too much fear in us to even start it.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that we sort of started in a special way where we're like, oh yeah, let's just grab some mics and talk drunkenly and see what happens. That natural progression has helped us a lot. And that does kind of play into the fact that, yes, we definitely have imposter syndrome and we wouldn't be here if it didn't start off a little bit more naturally.
Yeah. I think sometimes like, I don't want to say, like, I read our reviews, I read our comments here and there. There's an expectation from people now with us. Like, oh, you guys should be covering this topic. I should be covering this. You guys should invite this person. Or like, you guys don't talk about this enough. And I'm just like, shit, like, are we not doing enough? But at the same time, knowing that I know our bandwidth, like, I know how hard you guys are working throughout the week and like trying to kill at your own jobs. I feel like I'm struggling with like, I want to do all these things because they want us to do that. Do I really want to do this? But I'm also trying to balance work. So I feel like a sense of imposter syndrome because I don't know if I'm doing enough for ABG.
Right.
I would also see it as an opportunity to encourage like anyone who is writing to us and not hearing their stories, like we would love for you to go out there and put out your stories, right? It should be an encouragement for more different types of perspectives and content. Because, we can't be everything to everyone.
I agree.
I know we've had some listeners who come up to us at meetups and stuff and say, you guys are inspiring me to do side projects or things like that. To know that if you are feeling senses of like imposter syndrome, if you feel like a fraud at times, like you're not good enough, like you're not worthy, that's normal. That shouldn't stop you from pursuing something that you want to do.
And I think if anything, hopefully this episode will help you see how much of imposter syndrome us three feel throughout our day-to-day lives, throughout work, throughout this podcast, whatever it is. It is, I think the more that you just talk about it, the more you try to normalize that this is okay. Like
it's normal to feel that way.
Exactly. In their heads, they have a lot of anxiety. They tell themselves that they're stupid. And as much as we shouldn't, like we do that. And that's okay.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. Being a working woman on the go, finding enjoyment and time in your day can be difficult. With Audible, we are able to get things done while losing ourselves to a story.
One of the best audiobooks I've consumed this past year was through Audible. This is a book I mentioned in episode number 35, and that is Becoming. It is written and narrated by our former First Lady, Michelle Obama. So there's something very engaging and empowering when you feel like she's whispering into your ear.
I've enjoyed a couple audiobooks by Brené Brown, who explores topics such as courage, vulnerability, and empathy. I spend almost 2 hours every day in a car, driving to and from work in LA traffic. Listening to audiobooks makes my time in the car more bearable and sometimes even enjoyable.
Start listening with a 30-day Audible trial, and your first audiobook plus 2 Audible originals are free. Visit audible.com/lowercase abg or text abg to 500 500.
That's audible.com/abg or text abg to 500 500.
All right, so another topic that I think a lot of us deal with our day-to-day is our dating life or our relationships. And so I'm not 100% sure if this falls under imposter syndrome, but like I think for me, like my tendency is that I want to say I have like some confidence in myself. I'm pretty confident who I am. With that, I do have high standards from some of the men I chase or like the men I'm interested in. And when I get with these guys, sometimes I do feel like I put these guys on a pedestal. I feel like, oh my God, they're more accomplished than me, or they're so much hotter than I am. And the moments in the beginning, when they want to date me, I'm like, really? You want to date me? You know, oh my gosh. The last two guys I've dated, I always felt they were hotter than me. And maybe at the time, I felt like I put physical appearance on a high pedestal for me, you know? But even one of the guys I dated, he literally like on campus, he was called like the God, which is so fucking weird to think about now.
Wow, people called him a god.
Like, we were young back then. Like, all the guys looked up to him because he was like not only really sweet, he was like smart and he was fit and like good looking, all these things that I think other people admire. And so when he chose to date me, I was like, what? Like, really? He was like, oh, Mel, you have like the perfect personality. And like, so in my head, I was like thinking, great, like my personality is what you're chasing, not my looks. I think in that moment, I felt like, why are you dating me? Kind of like, oh, I'm not as attractive as these other women. I felt kind of like not worthy to some degree. It's a thing I battle because I do feel confident going into it. I know like my personality is great and that's why you like me. But then I get scared going into the relationship because I feel like your rose-colored glasses will come off and you'll realize I'm not who you think I am. And that's something I struggled with in my last relationship too. And so I think when those walls come crashing down and those rose-colored glasses come off and they tell me I don't want to be with you anymore, I feel like my confidence gets shook. Because it's like I'm proving my imposter syndrome right. You weren't worthy for this person. You didn't like me for who you thought I was. So I feel like I'm kind of like, I juggle or I battle that a lot in terms of dating and relationships. Because like another thing someone said to me recently was, you guys know that like I am picky with the guys that I choose to date or want to be with. I think it's because I want to say I value myself in the sense that I'm accomplishing all these things. But someone said to me like, Mel, you could be a little bit more like lenient or like you could swipe more on guys. I'm just like, what is that supposed to mean? Like
maybe that's also a reflection of him, right? Maybe he's like, oh, these girls are not swiping on me. And he's probably like, Mel, as a female, swipe more
on me, right? Yeah. But then it makes me wonder, like, am I valuing myself too high to be with someone else? Like someone,
or that they think that you're valuing yourself too high.
Exactly. So then I'm like, is this imposter syndrome just like personally then, you know? So I don't know if that can
I think that's just a shitty comment.
Yeah. I don't think he meant it in that way because I think he's more like, you got to be more open-minded to love, which is funny because that was my like resolution for 2019. Yeah. But then you can also spin it like, well, are you thinking that my standards too fucking high? Or like, what's going on?
No, I definitely relate to that. And I have friends that, you know, I know that they come from a good place, but sometimes when people or even people I don't really know will say, yeah, you're like too picky, or maybe you should, you know, open up your options and that kind of thing. I'm like, I don't really know how to take that because I struggle with feeling the right amount of confidence, right? Because you don't want to devalue yourself, but then you also don't want to like overinflate your self-worth or whatever it is.
I think we're just like figuring it out right now because we're like, I don't know, you know? And
I think it's more just also for the girls out there who are single and that you have this battle, like that's a normal thing, right?
Yeah. F that guy. Just kidding.
Well, Helen, so my question for you, so being someone in a relationship, like we all know who your boyfriend is, we're friends with him. He's highly recognized in our community and he's doing great things. How do you feel dating someone that everyone kind of knows for, you know, like having this reputation?
Are you implying that I'm less?
No. Hell no, I'm not.
No, I see what you're saying. No, I know what you're saying. I'm just trying to put you in put in some hot water over here. No, I mean, I knew when I started dating him what I was getting myself into because obviously he has a lot bit more reach than I did, right? He's a public personality. I just work in finance. I sit behind a desk. So of course there was a feeling of like, okay, if I am going to date this guy, I know that I can't see him in a way where it's more like he's a celebrity. Yeah. Like if he's going to date me or if I'm going to date him, it has to be on just a very human level of do we get along and what do we laugh over and how do we work over like arguments and what can we relate on. And so for that has always been my premise for our relationship since day one, where if I looked at him on a pedestal, I know we would never work. So I would say that the beginning of our relationship was maybe a little bit more contentious because I did have to like fight for certain stances a little bit more to gain respect. Yeah.
You know what it is? It's not like you're trying to gain his respect. It's more like going into this relationship from a public or just from an outside perspective. You guys are technically not on equal playing fields because someone who is more recognized publicly versus someone who isn't, it's not really, the balance being isn't fair to a lot of people. But of course, knowing you, we know you're killing your career. So people who know you're like, no, they're evenly matched. You have no idea. But I think from outsiders who don't know you, because they don't know who you are, it's like, oh, who's this girl?
Yeah, like did you ever feel externally judged by other people?
Actually, surprising not so much. I thought that would be a bigger factor, but I don't think so. At least I never maybe took that to heart because maybe I kind of expected it when I did read certain comments like that. But yeah, I think in my mind, I was just like, okay, if this is to work, then there can't be an even footing between us. And yeah, I think because of that now, it definitely has created like long-lasting staying power within our relationship. Yeah. But yeah, I could see, I definitely expected that to be something that I would feel, that I had to make sure wasn't the case at the beginning of our relationship.
And I think this also plays onto a different topic because like I think from social media people expect this to be like, oh, they're like this perfect social couple, but in reality, like knowing you guys like at a personal level, I feel like you're such a strong woman killing your career that I feel like sometimes that gets overlooked. A lot of our friends are entertainment and media. I'm like, do you know how empowering she is working in this industry in finance? You know, so I'm just like, for me, it's just like, I feel like I'm protective over that with you because it's just like, I don't want anyone to ever think of you that way because it's just like, just because I'm not working in entertainment or doing other things doesn't mean she's any less.
I mean, I think also like this podcast has helped. Well, if anything, right? When you're in LA, you meet a lot of people in entertainment.
Yeah.
You bring up that you work in finance and they're just like, oh, like literally conversation dies.
Yeah.
Right. So this podcast has like helped that. I think if I were to think of myself as less for not being in the public eye, that would internally, like for sure, play into the relationship as me being very just insecure about things and needing more sensitivity from him. But then I think because I said right at the beginning, like I can foresee this being an issue, let's nip it in the bud and let's figure this out now. Then that hasn't happened. But yeah, I can see why people would think that.
I mean, that's a great takeaway is like if you walk into a situation knowing it's set up where you could potentially experience imposter syndrome, being aware of it means that you could like address it.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's so easy to just fall into that and just be like, all right, I'm just going to push life ahead and this is how it's supposed to be. And then you fall into this trap and So Janet, what about you with dating? Have you ever felt like
imposter
you didn't
syndrome.
this guy was so hot that you I
feel like I get knocked a lot from people thinking that I'm too picky, that I think I'm like better than guys or something.
So it's the same thing as what Mel that comment
but you know
that was given to Mel.
When I've been doing a lot more like personal reflection, and I think actually on a subconscious level it's because I feel lesser than. I get a comment a lot that I have a wall up, right? And I think I put that wall up because, especially if I like you, because then I'm afraid you're gonna hurt me, because then I'm afraid you're not gonna like me back. And I'm still not totally aware, like I'm still working through this. Is that really how I feel? But I think it comes from like when I was growing up in an area that was mostly like Caucasian people, and always just assuming, like I never thought that people I liked would ever like me back. I don't know. Some of it was like a personality thing, like I was a shy and quiet person, but also I didn't look like the hot girls, right? And so when I was younger, I do remember like if someone had said something about wanting to ask me out, I actually thought they were joking. Like that's how absurd I thought. I'm like, there's no way that you could like me. And then I think in hindsight, okay, that probably feeds into a lot of getting older. Like, of course, you know, like I've dated people and you have a better sense of like your personal self-value or worth or whatever it is, but potentially a lot of it comes from a place of you don't look like the attractive people that you're around.
I agree. We were talking before this, and I feel like I think imposter syndrome I struggle with also in a friendship level, in a sense that like I can see how this relates to my romantic problems or issues in terms of imposter syndrome. It's just like I think growing up like you, and to some degree, I never felt really like physically beautiful or attractive. I never thought I was ugly growing up, but I think the fact that I was surrounded, like the popular girls were always the pretty ones. Like even growing up, my friends now are like, you two are gorgeous to me, you know, and like my close friends
you're
are
gorgeous too. Not just saying that, seriously.
Another example of imposter syndrome. I can't take it's compliments sometimes, but there are times, like, I'm not gonna lie, there are times, like everyone else, when you put on your fucking 4 eyelashes, like, I look fucking banging, you know, I do feel like that. But for majority on an everyday level, I don't think I feel gorgeous every day. But that is normal. But I think it kind of plays into...
It's all that boy who made that comment about dating you for your personality.
Yeah, so I think for me, I had to overcompensate by not feeling pretty, by like having this friendly, open personality. And I had to kill it at work because that was the only way I could make up for the fact that I wasn't as hot as these girls. I wasn't like as fit or all these things. I mean, I feel like I could just work on, but I don't want to. I feel like I had to kill it at work and my personality to kind of make up for the lack of confidence I had in my looks. So even today, like, I am surrounded by gorgeous, accomplished women. I brag about my friends all the time because I care about them so much. I value them in terms of their looks and what they accomplish, in hopes that that's a reflection of who I am. Like the whole cheerleader effect. Like, I'm like hoping that, like, oh, I'm part of the group.
Let's talk about the cheerleader effect.
Osmosis. Through osmosis.
But it's just like, when you see like a group of them, you assume all of them are attractive, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, or you see a group of, like, say, women, and they're all together. You get this image that all of them are hot until you start picking each of them out individually, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's like, sometimes I have this like deep fear. Like, let's say I'm in Vegas at a day club, and you see these group of like hot women. I'm like, yeah, I'm part of the group. I'm hot. But they look closely at me. I'm not one of the hot ones in their eyes. And it shouldn't even matter to me because, like, it should matter what I think about myself. But I don't know. I feel like I get pockets of feelings like this. And it goes back to my insecurity of, like, maybe I'm not hot enough. You know, maybe I'm not, I don't know, attractive enough. Even though I do feel like I am sometimes. It's just weird because, like, I'm not saying that I feel ugly all the time, but I don't feel pretty all the time either. But I think that's actually quite normal to feel. But I do see how it affects some of my friendships. I do feel validation when someone calls me attractive, you know, when I actually have my 4 eyelashes on. And I do see why I surround myself with attractive, smart women, because I want to be that too.
Well, I brought up the example of the guy because I do think a lot of these types of ways of thinking come from like childhood experiences, right? And so when we talk about, like, for my example, if I were culturally being around people that you look different from, or even in your friendship circle, if everyone is a certain way and you're called out for being different in some way, then it kind of plays into a lot of, when you are older, what is like an insecurity or what makes you feel like you're an imposter or a fraud about.
Yeah. I mean, that's true, because looking back at my childhood, I don't think I was ever really chased. Boys didn't like me growing up.
Except for the God.
Yeah, that was college hit. But I was in disbelief, like, no way you can like me. But then I was like, yeah, personality, I have to bank on this.
Yeah.
That's why I do find it weird now, where I do feel like I'm growing into my skin as I age, which I'm really happy about. But it still feels a little odd to me when someone's like, you're attractive.
Actually, you did mention like the inability to take a compliment.
Yeah.
So that's like a signal of imposter syndrome, or like,
I think
it's a type of, right? Like,
or that's
you feel
like a reaction.
It's a reaction.
Yeah, because you don't believe that you're attractive enough.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is pretty common in Asian women? Like, you're not supposed to accept compliments,
I think so.
right?
Oh, yeah.
I think whether it's from your looks or from your career or
cooking.
whatever, you're cooking.
It actually is, isn't it? Like, it's part of the cultural politeness to deny compliments. If someone says something nice about you, you say, oh, no.
Right.
Actually, there's a prominent scene in the Jola Club where Waverly is bringing her new boyfriend to meet her mom, and her mom made this amazing feast, and she's known for this feast. But the Asian way of like not taking compliments come to play in the scene, because as her mom presents the meal, she's like, oh, this is nothing. Oh, this is just an everyday type of thing. Yeah. But knowing deep down, she put in hours of work to this meal. And so her boyfriend at the time wasn't Asian, he was Caucasian. So he was like, okay, he took it as at face value. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. You need a little bit of salt, and put salt.
Did you put soy sauce? Or was it salt? Soy sauce, right?
Soy sauce on it. And you could tell the mother was mortified.
Right.
But you knew when she was saying that, she meant it as, I worked hard. This is something I care about.
Right.
But she doesn't present it that way.
Right. That is, again, not owning up to your accomplishments, or not sort of rewarding yourself for what you're capable of doing.
Yeah.
I think also like proves the point that imposter syndrome isn't something that's like a consistent thing, right? That it comes in and out. So you might feel imposter syndrome at your job or with your friends or with someone you're dating. It's normal that you'll have some days where you feel that and some days where you don't. But even just like talking about it, I think that helps alleviate, right? Like that it's normal to feel those feelings.
It also feels like I'm like digging into my psyche, or my like deep down, like, why do I feel this way? Like finding the reasons. It's like a out loud therapy session.
Yeah. I think even having this term that this is an okay thing, that people do go through this, is something that does sort of just normalize a conversation. And it's like, it's okay. It's okay to feel like you don't deserve to be where you are, but you fully do, because you are there and you got there through your own merit. Yes. So props to you, wherever you are right now in this world, listening to this. Yeah.
All right, everyone, that wraps up another episode of ABG and the topic of imposter syndrome. I don't know about you ladies, but for me, this is really therapeutic to talk about it, because I feel like this is actually something we don't really talk about out loud. And I feel like I was able to dive really deep into why I feel this way sometimes. So we encourage you guys to also do this with your friends.
Yes.
and maybe some of your coworkers if that would help you with your professional career. If you guys have any stories you guys want to share, please email us at asianbossgirl@gmail.com.
I think what's interesting as a takeaway is like the whole phrase of fake it till you make it. Maybe it's more like fake it, talk about it, tell people about how you're feeling, and then make it together. Build up that community.
We are also all over social media. Our handle is @AsianBossGirl. You can find us on all the podcasting platforms such as iTunes and Spotify. Subscribe, leave us a rating and a review. We love those. Thank you so much.
And we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.